I'd like to thank you for your attention and now invite my panellists on for the discussion of stigma. So thank you very much. So I'd like to welcome, with no further ado, Ambassador Barbara Birx, who is an American. I do apologise.
It's Debbie. Don't worry.
Ambassador Birx has been a real force of nature in taking on the global role of trying to get action on tackling HIV/AIDS. We have Chandi Moore, who is an activist for transgender people, particularly at-risk youth. And we have, lastly, Quinn Tivey, who is an activist as well, and runs and plays an important role at the Elizabeth Taylor AIDS Foundation, where he also is Elizabeth Taylor's one of her grandchildren. So welcome to the panel. Ambassador, I wanted to start with you. This issue of stigma, how big a problem is it when we think about tackling the HIV/AIDS crisis?
If you had asked me even a year ago, I would have said it was a smaller problem, but it's a bigger problem than it's ever been. The actual space that individuals have, the violation of human rights, the level of violence in communities against LGBT, whether you're in Orlando or you're in Uganda or Tanzania, that space that was given, that public health response is narrowing to a lack of a public health response. So everything that we celebrate, when we celebrate the decline and the change of the HIV/AIDS trajectory, behind that is increasing levels of stigma and discrimination that are marginalizing people in every single community, every place in the world, while people are giving lip service to a public health response. And this is what we have to change together and raise voices about it. Every one of us sees it, whether it's in the subway or the bus or in the classroom. Every one of us has to speak up in an unrelenting voice, and we're thrilled that The Economist is speaking to this issue, but I think it has to be a global community. In sub-Saharan Africa, 60% of the population is going to be under 20 within the next couple of years. We need every under 20 to say, that is not my world that I want to grow up in. I want to grow up in a world of inclusiveness. I want to grow up in a world of social and cultural embracing of all people. And so we have an opportunity to change the future if everybody's voices is raised.
And what do you see as the particular opportunities, you think, globally for actually changing that attitude?
I think you need to call out your leaders in social media every day. When someone says something in their papers or in a speech, and the global community needs to speak to that. You can find these. Go on Google, look for LGBT issues, look for human rights, and you will see these violations over and over again. We know people are interconnected on the social media, and we need to be able to call this out as a community. Yes, there's a legal framework, which is horrifying, as you described in India, but worse than that is an insidious feeling that if you are a gay man in Tanzania, you are at threat every day, and those who want to provide services to you are under that same threat. That is what we have to say is unacceptable.
So, Chandi, what about here in America, where there's obviously the issue over the bathroom access has highlighted a lot of latent stigmatism here in America. What can be done about it? How big a problem is it?
Well, again, like my beauty just said, things need to be said. People need to be able to address these issues amongst themselves. Everyone has been in the bathroom with a trans person, whether they knew it or not. And so, having said that, anybody who wants to use the bathroom is going in there just to do that, use the bathroom. No one's focused on anybody's genitalia, or you shouldn't be anyway. But nobody should be focused on that, and it's just about using the bathroom. And why make that issue so difficult for any human being? It's a human right.
And think we wouldn't have lines anymore if we could just go in any bathroom we wanted to.
But talk more broadly about, so these younger transgender people that you're dealing with who are at risk, what are the kinds of stigma they're facing?
They're facing stigma around discrimination, employment, just housing is one. I mean, they deal with healthcare is another, just dealing with so many different things when trying to be in pursuit of their own personal happiness.
And you've been involved in something called the UCLA Sex Squad. Tell us a bit about that.
Yes, well, the Sex Squad, you guys got a little piece of the video, so what we're going to do is just show it to you right now.
Well, that was the group I thought was the Economist journalists.
And then I'll speak about it.
Okay. You may get my presentation all over again.
Again. Oh, yeah.
Sex Squad is a troupe of about a dozen students at UCLA who tell their own stories about sexuality and growing into themselves as adults.
Based on their personal experiences around sexual health and allied topics like gender, like health ed in school, fuse that with some humor, some hilarity, and then tour to LAUSD high schools.
They perform sex ed. They tell their own stories through multiple ways, through songs, through performances.
Today we're going to be talking about the birds and the bees.
The idea is if you talk about taboo subjects in a way that is lighthearted and humorous, that you can actually have a deep, sustained conversation. We have to be able to talk about sexuality in order to be able to talk about HIV.
So tell us a bit about what that means, how that's working in practice. What are they doing?
So
how
that's
are they changing?
just a piece of what the Sex Squad does, and that's what they're doing is something that needs to be done. They're keeping sex positive education innovative. They're making it something fun for young people to be able to see, so that helps them see things better in the future. HIV infections are highly up in the age groups of 13 to 29, so we continue to need these type of things in our areas. And due to things like the Sex Squad, it's been up from 15% to 59%. So it is working. So it's great to be able to see the fruits of your labor growing.
Great. Now, Quinn, you're focused on Malawi. Tell us a bit about what you're doing there.
Sure. Well, the Elizabeth Taylor AIDS Foundation operates with a number of partners in Malawi. Firstly, Gaia, the Global AIDS Interfaith Alliance, Grassroots Soccer, and Mothers to Mothers. And I'll focus for the moment on our work that we've been doing with Gaia, which includes a number of mobile healthcare clinics, male-specific men's testing days, and door-to-door testing programs. And if I may just introduce a problem that we isolated and then have since been successfully confronting, I'd like to use a quote from All America in 2015. Two different men, both from Malawi. The first quote is, "A man in his rightful senses cannot be enticed to go for testing. I cannot be told what to do by a woman. Most of these people who visit us to talk of HIV testing are women." And the second quote, is, "I cannot go for testing because at the nearest clinic, most workers chat with people in this community. So I'm afraid that once I go for testing, they will publicize my results, whether I'm positive or not." So I reference those as an introduction to a problem that we recognized in about 2012, which is that our mobile healthcare clinics were treating about 5 women for every 1 man. And those quotes, I think, speak to one of the reasons as to why that was the case. But the male-specific testing days, from which this is actually that's a photo from our mobile healthcare clinic, and it actually shows exactly that statistic from 2012. The other photo that was up just a moment ago was from a male-specific testing day, and it was at a place of employment, which we were able to organize in part through the managers at the place of employment. And then we also do other ones here at community centers, for example, that we organize with the help of village chiefs and local community leaders. And I think we just saw, here you can see the age range actually, and you can see a number of men waiting to be tested. And so on the topic of community, using these as the first entry point, and then I can reference door to door, what the second quote here speaks to, right, is isolated fear, stigma within a community. But if we can approach a community as a whole unit and treat everybody with an equal footing, then we have found that since these types of operations, our statistics have dropped from 1 to 5 to 1 to 1.6. So we've almost totally leveled the playing field with regards to reaching men in Malawi. And in regards to door-to-door testing specifically, we've found that only 2% of the people approached in this community setting have declined to be tested. So we have essentially a 98% effective rating by those standards. So again, here the emphasis would be to combat that type of attitude, enter into the community, work with the local community, work with community leaders, and we were able to see really dramatic changes in the last few years that we've been doing this.
Now, if I think back to long ago to when I was a student and the AIDS epidemic began, I mean, even in a country like Britain, it produced this tremendous opening up of people who never used to talk about sex and anything like that. And we all became aware of safe sex, and infection rates were much lower than people feared they would be as a result of that. And so I think I'm very troubled by hearing more and more about how that age group today is the area where actually infection rates are much higher than they were a generation earlier. Why, Barbara, so Ambassador, why is that actually happening now?
Well, I thank you for raising that. I mean, the exciting thing is a significant part of the world is going to be under 20. The unexciting part of that is the highest risk to many of these diseases. First are 15 to 19-year-old women, and then 20 to 30-year-old men. And this is quite a difficult and overwhelming situation when you look at today and say we're going to have 100% more 15 to 24-year-olds in sub-Saharan Africa, and are our programming directed at them and the message directed to them. So these epidemics continue to evolve like they've done in the United States, and you have to constantly asking yourself, are your messages that will resonate with the group? And is the person delivering the message, oh, that's cool. That was a good ringtone.
Mental health
break there. Look at that. Look at my body. I love that. Okay. So it's really that very piece of the issue, that ringtone. How do we reach young people where they are with the messages, and start with the message that they want to hear? We know with young women, they don't want to hear immediately about HIV. They want to hear about how to not become pregnant. That's their key issue. Meet them there, talk about that, and then talk about HIV. And I think what the second piece of it is we're really investing in measuring stigma and discrimination. Because we can talk about it all day, but if we don't actually start doing things and measuring their impact, we'll still be talking about this next year. So I think we're investing money in measuring stigma and discrimination, and then looking at that change over time with the solution-based approach that we have. But that still doesn't ensure that young people won't understand their risk and take action. I think figuring out how to present things in infographics or in 7-second slots or in YouTube video or whatever it is to really engage and understand what's going to resonate.
So Quinn, I mean, we're almost out of time, unfortunately, but what's your biggest challenge for this audience in terms of what more could be done in the work you're doing, how they can help you?
Okay, I have two answers to that, two calls to action. The first is specific exactly to us at the Elizabeth Taylor AIDS Foundation, and it's a little bit shameless, so I'll get it out of the way. But if you text LOVE to 27722, you'll be donating $10, which will buy 3 HIV tests in Malawi.
So LOVE to 27722. 2722.
27722. I'm just going to double check. 27722. And I see a lot of glowing faces here. So maybe if I could see, like, I don't know, at least a few hundred more, and everybody could just grab their phones and just text LOVE 27722. That's 3 HIV tests. And that's the #1 step. You can't get on treatment if you can't be tested. You can't address cultural stigma. You can't address communities unless the community is talking about its status. And on the topic of conversation, I would add to that something that is totally free but could save a life is just talk, just communicate, make sure you're tested, engage with your friends, engage with your family, younger especially, older, doesn't matter. Talk about HIV, talk about AIDS, and talk about any of the social, sexual, racial inequalities that stand as barriers in the fight against HIV and AIDS and so many other fights as well.
And Chandi, I want to give the last word to you. What challenge do you have for the audience? What ask?
My challenge would be, again, for them to join forces with the Elizabeth Taylor AIDS Foundation and fight stigma. Just like any other human being, everyone deserves the right to be secure in who they are when they walk out their door each day. If you see something that doesn't look right to you, say something about it. Don't sit back and let your voice not be heard. Be a voice for someone, regardless of their gender identity.
Ambassador, you'd agree with that?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Thank you for the panel. It was really good stuff. Thank you.